Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Crystal Water Experience podcast. I've got the amazing Isabel here, and we're going to be talking about astrology today. But don't worry, this is not a woo-woo conversation because I'll tell you now that Isabel is one of these people that is involved in changing the world for a better place. I know her from Cabby and all the work that she's doing there. If you don't know, the Community Assembly of the British Isles. So this girl is hardcore. She knows exactly what's going on in the world, and she does not live on a fluffy cloud somewhere. So if you've heard about astrology, maybe you know what your star sign is, this podcast is for you because every week I try to bring a new perspective on things that you might not have heard of before in holistic health and therapies and things like that, and try and give you a no-nonsense explanation about how these things work. So please have a listen if you don't know what this is all about. It will be for educational purposes, interesting purposes. And I'll tell you, Anna is one of those warriors that it's something, if she's interested in stuff and she's heard about it, you'll want to listen to it. So welcome, Annabelle, to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, very, very nice to be here, Joe. Thank you so much.
No worries. So I've had to say that at the beginning, right? Because I find that we're kind of being compartmentalized into, there's woo-woo people and non-woo-woo people, and that you have to discount it. If you're in one camp, right, you can't listen to the other camp. And we're trying to break down all of those barriers these days, aren't we? Because we're trying to be isolated on many things. And astrology is, as I was saying just before we started the show, I know literally nothing about apart from the fact that I'm Virgo. But I did have my chart read once. And I'm a very intuitive person anyway, so I just kind of go through life going, I think I know what's coming up next, right? But somebody read my chart for me and it pulled out a few things and they turned out to be extremely accurate, well in line with my intuition. Because there were major life-changing events, I was able to have a plan. So when they happened, I mean, I'm chill anyway, but mine was not only was I chill, but I had a plan. And I understand why astrology is a thing, and we might or might not have time to go into that case because I believe we live in a quantum universe. This is all a virtual reality game, depends on how you're going to play it. And so I understand it from that perspective. But in terms of astrology, I have very little knowledge. So I hope to drag that information out of you today so that people can understand that perspective better, perhaps sprinkling a little bit of the quantum reality we live in and why this stuff can be real, actually, why there is a valid reason about why this stuff can be real. And also show people, if they're interested in this stuff, where they can go to learn it rather than just randomly applying to an ad on Facebook and hoping you'll learn how to be the brilliant astrologer that you are today. So I'm coming from a very naive perspective. And I wonder, just based on what I've just said, what is your experience of people who, when you say, I'm an astrologer?
Well, some people, in fact, many people are curious,
Yes.
and they may not understand much. Others want to provide me with the benefit of their ignorance to tell me why, this is a fraud. And I do mean that in all seriousness. It is the benefit of their ignorance because what they know about the subject is the sum of zero. So I think we live in a very materialist world, and we have been, and school really pushes us into if you can't explain it, it doesn't exist and it's not real. Well, folks, here's the news. That's not science. What science is exploration and questioning. You set your hypothesis, yes. You experiment, but your experiment is either going to prove or disprove your hypothesis. And this is not a lab because astrology is a living experience. So it is not conducted in a lab, and therefore it is not replicated in the same way that you might be able to replicate things that you put into a lab. And the reason that's not possible is because this is about people. And who do you know that's exactly the same as everybody else? It's not like that. And equally, also, And I can hear everybody going, oh, yeah, but there's only 12 signs. And yes, but that's the sum of the ignorance because there's more to it than 12 signs. So that's really important to remember that your sun sign is 1/12, maybe, of everything that is within you. So there's a lot to understand in order to be able to, or let's put it a different way. Imagine that you are a cake, and that means there are lots of different ingredients that go into the making of the cake. And by the way, you can use the same recipe and not be able to replicate it exactly because the timing is wrong, because the room temperature is wrong. So there or is different. There are so many components here. So it's complex and it's because it's about life. And as I say, it's about you as an individual, but also, and here's the beauty, it's about you and your relationship with other people, but even more magical, it's about you as you stand in this universe and your relationship with it and your soul's, I guess, purpose, or I call it the soul's plan. So all of these things come into play. And with astrology, you can be as superficial or as deep as you want to be. I've been practicing now for over 30 years. I think it must be about 35, 36 years. And I'm still surprised. And most of all, here's the thing, I'm still surprised by my own chart because we're always growing, we're always developing. And the promise that is there in that blueprint in the chart keeps unfolding until the moment in which we're ready to part this mortal coil.
I love that. And I really respect your 30 years experience. I mean, you wouldn't have done it for 30 years. I know how practical and what a warrior queen you are. You are not the sort of person that is just fiddling around at the edges because Anna is not that type of person, right? She is getting stuff done. There's no way that you would be doing this stuff unless it was having a real impact and helping people and you saw some real truth in it. But I think like anything, it's one of the it's like it's like anything, right? You can't, it depends on your level of understanding, consciousness, comprehension as to how you take that information and then how you reveal it, right? And how you reveal it to yourself. And so the experience is extremely important, but also the wisdom that has taught you how to read these things is also important, right?
It is, and this is so ancient. I on my YouTube channel, Life Astrologer, I interview astrologers from all over. And only about 2 weeks ago, I think it went out last week, we were looking at the ceilings, the astrological depictions on ceilings of one of the Dendra temple in or pyramid in Egypt.
Hmm.
And we were looking at that. This is Hellenistic Egypt, and so there's the Greek influence in there. But the fact of the matter is that there is some crossover because there's always a cross fertilization that happens across the ancient world. People did travel much, we think that we are the travelers, but people traveled a lot in those times. And there was a huge, as I say, cross fertilization between the different traditions and wisdoms in the Middle East, and actually also tying into India. I think because of Alexander the Great, that had a great deal to do with this in the Hellenistic period. But prior to that, there were also links between India and the Middle East. So there's a lot that is happening there. And so this wisdom goes back. But I think what I was wanting to say is that it, if we look at history, there's the period in which we begin to get everything written, but there's the period in which it's oral. And this goes back to the oral period because astrology is something that evolves over time, because it is about our experience as human beings living on this planet. So there are discoveries that have been made in this century, and we are unfolding what that symbolism means in terms of our collective development and consciousness. But 100 years from now, we're going to be a lot more experienced at understanding those symbols. And yet they're already speaking to us. So we have to always remember that this is something that goes back before written records. And so it is a slow process of evolution. And what that means is each generation brings its experience and adds to the collective wisdom. Each generation refines and changes things according to the times. So, for example, in the 1960s and 70s, there was a huge explosion of psychological astrology.
Hmm.
So now it doesn't mean that the ancients didn't do psychological astrology. If we read William Lilly, who was writing in in the 1600s and who is our best um, known astrologer of the time, and whose book has been in continuous publication since he wrote it and published it. If you read that, you see that there is psychology there as well. It's just that it was framed differently. And so come the 1960s and 70s, when there's been this huge interest in Carl Jung and in his writings, suddenly we get Dane Rudhyar and others bringing in a fusion of psychology and ancient wisdom. So now we've got a whole branch of astrology that's devoted to development and growth. And then the evolution of the soul, so evolutionary astrology and karmic astrology, and all of it kind of fuses. Just looking at what happened in the last century, it's a good example of how astrology changes and evolves over time. And now we've got, as I said, a whole host of new discoveries. And what are we doing with them? How are
Hmm.
we using them? So it's not static, it evolves with us.
Beautifully put, beautifully put. I love that. And I guess with experience, you can look back at, past correlations and you can look at their accuracy and work out actually the interpretation of all that. And then you can reframe things. So we're always learning. And I just would love your perspective on how you think this works. Like someone's born and in a place and in a time, and somehow these charts are able to be created. How do you think that happens? Have you got any idea of the mechanism or what are your thoughts on
Well,
that?
so this is an experiential art. And what that means is our observations, everything about astrology is the cumulative observations of centuries
Hmm.
of correlations between what we see above and what happens below. So it's that famous Hermetic principle,
Okay.
as above, so below. So we can look at it as a mirror, and we see this in synchronicity. So everyone has had the experience of something they might call coincidence. But this is also about synchronicity and living in a universe that communicates with us. So it's for some people, they will dismiss it. For others, it's open. And it's so funny because just this week, and it's not going to go out for a few weeks yet, I interviewed a psychiatrist, Dr. Bateman, who has made a study of synchronicity. And we were talking about this very subject, and he was saying that there is a prerequisite to this, and that is and he calls it meaningful coincidences, synchronicities. It's the same thing. But he was talking about how, as a prerequisite, we have to be open to the possibility that there are signs that come to us. So I call it breadcrumbs,
Mm.
whereby something happens and you decide to follow the breadcrumbs and it leads you to something amazing. And if you begin to open your eyes and see that as a possibility, life becomes much more magical. Now, the question is, how does this work? And we really don't know.
Mhm.
But the best thing I've seen that explains how this is possible is chaos theory. And so I this is the work of the wonderful Bernadette Brady, who is an astrologer, but she also has a science bent, if I can say, where she wants to look at the two together. And, you know, there are a lot of astrologers out there who want to do the linear approach to proving that astrology is real. And they will want to look at statistical studies, and they will want to, yeah, you can do all of that. But actually, this is about patterns, and it's recognizing patterns. So when we say experiential, what we mean is we're noticing patterns. So that comes back to the synchronicities. In fact, Dr. Bateman, who I was talking about a moment ago, he says that, and this is the fascinating thing about his book, is that the synchronicities that happen to you in your life will have themes, just like your dreams. And that when you unpick the themes, you begin to see a pattern about the types of synchronicities. And then you can engage with it more, perhaps, and derive more meaning and more guidance from them. So I thought that was fascinating because, again, we're back to chaos theory. And I am not an expert on chaos theory by any stretch of the imagination. But the idea is that rather than living in a linear world, we are living in a world of a multitude of possibilities. And because we're living in this world of a multiple possibilities, and then it means that connections are made within that fold. So I think, it was the reason I was interested in chaos theory is because years ago, when the BBC still had something to offer, I was watching, and there was a program about chaos theory. And I sat up on my sofa with my mouth open because I thought, that's it. That's how astrology works. And then fast forward 20 years on, I come across Bernadette Brady's work. And I thought, oh, somebody else noticed. And so I think it's something for people to go and explore. And failing that, the best way to test astrology is through your experience. And I think this is the magic of it. Was it last week, the week before? I was doing a reading for a client, and I looked at her chart and I said, we were talking about a particular issue that she struggles with. And I was looking for a way to give her some insight to help her understand where this came from. And I just asked her, I said, what happened to you when you were 9 months or perhaps 9 years? And she said, actually, it was both 9 months and 9 years. And the theme of both events was exactly the same. That was the pattern. And so it doesn't matter how long I do this for, it still takes my breath away because there's something utterly magical about looking at some symbols on a chart and deriving meaning from them, which is more than an intellectual exercise, is meaningful to the person sitting in front of me. And it helps them. So my other hat is I'm a therapist. I'm an analytical hypnotherapist. To sit with a chart in front of me gives me a shortcut to what's going on with my clients. And I can ask them questions that are going to get us to the point much more quickly because I have this beautiful thing sitting in front of me that is pointing to where it hurts. And although when I'm wearing my therapist's hat, it has to come from the client, I can ask the right questions.
Anna, I love this. And this really resonates with the conversation I had with Kelly earlier because, and I wonder if the guys and girls listening to this have this experience. You can get into an issue where you have the same thought loop over and over again about something that's happening like now, and it keeps coming in your head. And I'm now aware when this happens. So I know when I'm looping something that there is something I need to clear. So my first port of call is to go into that interaction or whatever it is that's caused that thought loop. And I clear that, I look at it and from all sides and I neutralize it. I give it love and compassion and whatever's happened. And sometimes, nothing, there's nothing actually traumatic. It's just something, that conversation or what that person said, or that person just keeps coming up and again and again. And when it still keeps coming up, I go, there's something deeper. This thought loop is attached to something in me, and this thought loop is bringing attention to something deeper in me. So then I try and logically figure out where that is. And then I have to go a bit deeper now. And I go, well, it was to do with buying something. And it was to do with buying this. And maybe it was something around an attachment or something that's happened. And then I try and rack my brains and my memory for whatever that's associated with. Sometimes I'm successful and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember when this happened. And it brings up this fresh emotion, this fresh trauma, which is my body's way saying, hey, I'm still stuck here. Can you let it go? Otherwise, you're going to keep looping this. And then I'm able to go in and I'm able to go, oh, yeah, I remember that. And I didn't resolve that because I wasn't aware at that time of all this stuff. So I go into then that time, in my memory and I clear it. But, sometimes I can't clear it, right? Because I don't know what it's attached to. And I even say out loud, oh, for goodness sake, Joe, what is this thought loop attached to? And I get very frustrated, right? Because I don't have the tools and I have to sit in meditation and blah, blah. And sometimes I have to just sit there with the feeling of going, I'm not going to remember what it is, but at least I can connect with the emotion. And so I am very well aware of this, the frequency nature of ourselves, the quantum nature of ourselves. So I have that awareness. But I think this is only new to very many people. And what you've just described is flipping amazing because you can then say, like, according to your chart, something would have happened then. That then triggers that person to go back into there because as sure as damn it, if you don't deal with it, you are going to get things on loop and they come in cycles. This is very common to see this. You'll get this cyclically, and it'll ramp up and ramp up in terms of its intensity until you sort it out. It can manifest and it starts then to manifest something physical. And this is where a lot of physical trauma and illness and injury It's actually your body going, oh, for goodness sake, woman, you didn't deal with it at the time. I was reminding you with your thought loops and you didn't do anything. But you have something to heal in your field. And so, Anna, I love that conversation. I love what you've just said. That connection between those two things, and you've talked about it before, now makes perfect sense to me. So I wondered if you could give some more examples of the sort of things that people come to you with and how that process might have helped them.
Oh, that's just so huge.
I bet you've got a million stories, right?
Yeah, 30 odd years of it. I think, here's an interesting one. This was a workshop um, a while ago now, but it really stuck in my memory. And it was a workshop that was focusing on Venus specifically in the chart and relationships. And there was a woman there who had had some very tragic and sad relationships involving abuse. And she said, "What is wrong with me that I attract that all my relationships are like this?" And I had listened to all of the stories and I was looking at the chart, obviously. But what she had failed to do was to see that every man she had been with was the same man. And that's why the experiences were the same. So what does that mean? I asked her, I said, have you thought maybe that you are, instead of you attracting something, that you are attracted to a particular type? And she said, no, they were all very different. And I said, well, here's what you said about them. And I do make notes when I'm listening. So I was able to quote back to her what she said about each and every one. And she said, oh, I said, that's what I'm talking about. Can you see now that there's a theme running through? She said, oh, yes. I said, right. Okay. So the chart is pointing at your dad. Tell me about your dad. Well, she then went and used exactly the same language about her dad as she was using about the men she was having a relationship with. And I said to her, have you considered, did you hear what you just said about your father? The look on her face was quite stunning because she suddenly realized she was still having this relationship with her father, but through all the men in her life. Now, this is freedom. This is what freedom looks like. It doesn't fix her life, but what it does is enable her to not feel like a victim and to see that this isn't life happening to her, nor does it blame her either, because that's really important. But it explains a natural process. And the natural process is psychology. It's called being human. In that the traumas that we experience, be they big traumas or small traumas, and small traumas are not hardly noticeable, but they're cumulative. They form a pattern of thinking and expectation, which means that we then reenact them. And we don't reenact them because of some sort of perverse aspect of our personalities. We reenact them because we're still looking for that thing that we wanted from the original person. validation, recognition, love, whatever it is that was missing, affection. We're looking for that. And we're looking for it with people who unconsciously remind us of the original person. So consciously, we may think that we are having a relationship with somebody completely different, but unconsciously, we've recognized something. And it's a template that we're working to. And when we have that recognition, then we're free from notions of victimhood. We're free from notions of blame as well. And we now understand that this is a process that we need to engage with. And now we're working with our charts and the energies within it, or symbolized within it, in a much more dynamic and creative way. In the same way that collectively, you see, the other thing is that we are going through the most turbulent of times that I think have created PTSD in the majority of the population. I think we're suffering from PTSD. And you can see that in the chronic stress levels, the chronic stress and the high levels of stress that we're experiencing as a society worldwide. How do we make sense of this? So, looking at what's happening in the sky, we can see that there are certain patterns there. What are we going to do with these patterns is the question. So in the last 7 years, we've had, for example, Uranus sitting in the sign of Taurus. Uranus is about revolution, and it's radical. Uranus is not the friend of nature. And the reason it's not the friend of nature is because it's so idealistic. And it looks at nature and sees it as being imperfect. What have we had in the last 7 years, do you think? An outright assault on nature that has driven the Supreme Court of this country to have to make a statement about biology. If that's not an extreme playing about with nature, I don't know what is. The attack on farmers, for instance, and on farming. So I can list, it seems, 100 of different ways in which attempts through so-called science, or let's just call it technology, has been used to tamper with nature. This has been going on for, forever, it seems. However, it's been especially intense in this period. When was Uranus last in Taurus? Well, Uranus was last in Taurus in the last World War. And what did we see in that time? Now, hands up if you recognize this. So, the Dig for Britain campaign, what was that? Pulling up gardens all over the country because food security. There was the worry, food security. And Taurus is the sign that is most associated with food and farming. What are so many people worried about at the moment? Food security all over again. Who's upset? Farmers are upset. So there's that. We have had, and I believe they've now pulled it from their website, but one of our biggest supermarkets with their blueprint for the food future, which involved no farms and all artificially made food. Okay? They've now pulled it because people were going, hang on a minute. What's this? This is a supermarket. Okay? So this is the next version of Uranus and Taurus. The first one was food security. We had the Dig for Britain campaign and we had food rationing. We've had some celebrities who shall remain nameless. Um, I, I am being cautious for censorship purposes, folks. I will let you and credit you with the intelligence to be able to go and find it out for yourselves if you don't already know. But there have been celebrities in that period of 2020 and 21 saying, and I quote, food should be rationed because people are too uneducated to know how to eat. Okay, so Uranus in Taurus again. Funnily enough, it was a Taurian who said this, which I thought was shocking, but never mind. So we have these patterns that we can see. And if that's not enough, Taurus is also about resources from a financial perspective. The last time Uranus was in Taurus, during that war, we saw property being requisitioned. Some of it was never returned to the original owners. And what have we had in this time? We have had blatant efforts to separate people from their land and blatant efforts to tax people into losing their homes, their farms, etc. So the issue of land and property has come up again. And let's not forget the wondrous idea of digital currencies. You see, all of these revolutions happening in the sign of Taurus, which symbolizes all of those things. And when we look at the past, we can see, and there's much more detail here than we have time for, but we can see how Uranus and Taurus last time did exactly the same thing, where we had people losing money, etc. On the continent of Europe, particularly because of the Nazis, it was very blatant, very obvious, taking away people's property, taking away people's money, which most of which has not, a lot of which has not been found. So these are the things that we look at. We look at these trends and we go, oh, okay, so what's the upside? Because if we look at the energies and we understand the symbolism behind them, we can be very creative with it. And we can see grassroots movements to reclaim land. Mm-hmm. We can see grassroots movements to create alternatives to currency, mm-hmm. or let's say fiat currency. We can see grassroots movements of people wanting to share land, buy land together. Mm-hmm. That's revolutionary too. And more people going, that's not how we want to farm. We want to farm this way, which is much more in harmony with nature. That's a revolution. Every revolution produces a counter-revolution. So you understand Uranus, you understand that energy, you look around and you can work with it. And you will feel the pull. Uh-huh. You will feel, and you won't even know why, but you will feel the pull. And for those who do know why, instead of feeling the pull and doubting, you just go, yeah, time's right. Let's go for it. Let's do it. Uh-huh. So this is how this is experiential. It's that it's all about your experience, your living experience, as you understand the information that is there for you, that's coming in through the symbolism of astrology. And then you work with it as creatively as possible.
I've got one comment and two questions. That was very beautiful. First of all, my first comment is about tell me you're in a simulation without telling me you're in a simulation. That's the first one. My first question is, well, how long is Uranus going to hang around in Taurus? And my second one is there a proper possibility that there is a controlling, powerful group of individuals on this planet that use astrology and therefore enact and enable things and go with the flow. So they know that the timing of such and such is coming, and they're like, right, we can work with that. So they exacerbate all of those things for their possibility. So there's a few things there for you to unpack
So,
there.
so that puts me in mind of one of the Harry Potter books, I believe the penultimate one or the last one, where the Minister for Magic goes and informs the Muggle Prime Minister that there is a psychopathic wizard on the loose that will, in all probability, be attacking the Muggle world. And the beleaguered Muggle Prime Minister, who's being blamed for all the calamities that are happening around him and has now realized that none of it has to do with him, but it's a psychopathic wizard on the loose, looks at the Minister for Magic that's telling him about this and says, but you're wizards. Can't you stop him? And the even more beleaguered Minister for Magic looks at him and says, yes, we are wizards and we're very good at it. But the other side are very good at it too. And so the answer to your question is most definitely yes. The world of, let's call it magical thinking, which understands that there is more to life and the rules of nature than meets the eye, that understands that not everything can be measured, has people within it who are very much controlling or holding the strings to the puppets that they manipulate. And yes, they do know astrology. It is a well-known fact that Hitler knew astrology, and that he used astrologers. It is a well-known fact that Reagan consulted astrologers. The question is, why then have the majority of the population been encouraged to believe that the world is something totally and exclusively materialist?
It puts us at a significant disadvantage to think we live in a three-dimensional only world and we get three-dimensional only science. And we're not taught anything about the quantum fields, which I believe astrology kind of falls into. And then worst of all, at the moment, there are now arguments. I mean, I can hear people out and out dismissing astrology because planets aren't real because they don't trust NASA. And that is still a 3D way of thinking. We're still talking about shapes. It's very limiting. I'm not saying whether you should believe NASA or not, but and actually it doesn't matter. What you're saying is astrology is built up over time when you can look at stars and stars, by the way, and I always had to describe this to somebody. Somebody says, well, stars don't exist and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, look at the definition of star. One definition of the word star is that it's a sun and you're seeing it from far away. But if you look at the dictionary definition of star, a star is a luminous object in the sky. And you can describe that to be a planet. So there are luminous objects in the sky. So, we've been, even as people are awakened, they're shut down and don't think about this stuff because we're not even allowed to look up there because it doesn't exist somehow when it clearly does. But there might be a different explanation. And I'm not telling whether you should trust agencies or not, because I certainly don't. But it's a way of shutting people down and putting people into boxes, and it puts us at a significant disadvantage. So with that in mind, and I love what you say about counter-revolution, because there's always going to be balance, but if the other side isn't as informed, that kind of counter-revolution isn't going to be as there. How long is Uranus going to be in Taurus for then, Anna?
Well, okay. So this particular transit of Uranus is already waning, and it because it entered Gemini this year,
Okay.
and it's coming back into Taurus until I believe it's the spring of next year, at which point it will go back into Gemini. So it means that when it comes back into Taurus, it's like its last hurrah. And often when things do that, this is kind of the final push for whatever changes we're being created, if I can put it like that.
Hmm.
And so I think we are in for a bumpy time with respect to the subjects that we've just been talking about or highlighting with Uranus and Taurus, finance, property, and indeed
Farming,
food
food.
farming. So this is going to, I think, be a potentially very challenging period still. However, um, with Uranus, one challenge kind of resolves itself a little bit and or unravels, and the other one comes in. And this is now what we're seeing also with Uranus in Gemini. We've had the opening salvos with the announcement of digital ID, and we are already set up in many parts of the British Isles with cameras everywhere, facial recognition, all the rest of it.
Mhm.
So Gemini is about communication, transportation, education, and information. And so it constitutes a revolution in all of those areas, for better and for worse. So we have already seen a trend towards home education, which authorities are trying to stamp out. Again, I think that there's going to be more coming from both sides in that direction. And already we are seeing a revolution happening in the car industry where public money is being used to subsidize electric vehicles that are being pushed. And the public are going, no thanks. So what we see is primarily fleet cars on the roads, but personal, private people are not buying into it very much. And actually, the counter revolution is interesting because in the last few days, I've heard that where the increase in sales has happened is in secondhand cars. But we're not talking about secondhand cars built in the last 2 or 3 years. We're talking about secondhand cars going back maybe 20 years. The reason being they are not being monitored in the same way or tracked in the same way. They can't be. And here's the crucial bit, they're easier to maintain. So you don't have to rely on other people to maintain them as much as you do for the newer generation of vehicles.
Mhm.
So I think this is a very interesting example of revolution breeding counter revolution, where people are saying, yeah, I see why you're selling me this car. And prestige doesn't mean that much to me. Freedom does. So I'm going to choose this car instead. Um, and so this is going to be this is always then a cat and mouse situation where revolution, no, pushback. And what I want to say is it's very easy to be daunted and afraid during these times. And, we're talking about Uranus. There's a whole lot more that's going on. I just picked it out because it's a very easy one for everyone to see and understand. Creativity and ingenuity are also Uranian. Flashes of inspiration are also Uranian. Invention is Uranian. And as much as new inventions are being, or attempts are being made to impose new inventions upon the general public, you are Uranian yourself in some way. And you have the ability to be ingenious and creative and to find solutions to the things that trouble you and that you're not happy with. So some people will embrace one aspect of modernity, the aspect that is being presented to them. They will embrace it and be happy with it. May they always be happy with it. Other people are looking at it and going, I like this bit, I don't like this bit. And so they have the ability to work with what they like and say, okay, I'm going to try something different with what they don't like. Others are going to look at it and go, no thanks, none of it. The whole kit and caboodle are out the window. I'm having none of it. So I'm going to change the way that I do things. And I'm going to be very creative and very ingenious. And then others might join me. And before we know it, we're creating an alternative. That's also very Uranian. So nothing is simply black and white. And in the same way that we said that astrology could be used in less wholesome ways, if I can put it like that, everything can. Everything can. Which means that you can choose what you do and how you do things in a way that is authentic to you. And that is really important, that we have the freedom to do that. Of course, remembering that in the process, there is the natural law that says do no harm. So all of it comes back to that.
Very beautifully put. I think that's very powerful, and I'm very grateful that we have an astrologer on the side of the people and the freedom. And I hope the people listening to this realize this is more than just about star signs and about why why your boyfriend keeps dumping you all the time, right? This is way deeper. And you've given us a lot of hope as well about what's going on over the next few months, that we know what's coming and we need to counter it. And I think this is the thing that I've learned is we're very much programmed from a very early age just to accept things as they roll out and just accept things the way that they are. And a lot of people are scared of change. Well, I think we're finding out that if you don't make the change, you don't make the counter revolution, the change is going to be made for you. So you're going to get changed either way. It depends if it's on your terms or somebody else's terms. And those terms are not going to be favorable to you because they're not interested in that. And I think it's very important that people are more aware of their environment and realize that they themselves have a responsibility in this change. So, for instance, I was hearing about I think it was Just Eat, Deliveroo, those kind of organizations that are very opportunistic when it comes to their workforces and have been for a long time. But we order from them from convenience. I mean, we've got local shops, local businesses, or whatever, and we're kind of, because we're lazy, we're like, okay, I'm going to do it like this instead of like reading the leaflets that get put through our door. But what's happened recently is because there's been an upsurge in this information about illegal immigrants working when they're not supposed to be, there's been a big pushback on the use of that. So actually, they've clamped down. They've clamped down on that because they were losing business. Now, why did it take that? Why are we allowing Deliveroo, Just Eat, their foreign company? Why have we got to this point? Why are we not now, during this period of revolution, creating and supporting our own things? Why are we going to these supermarkets that are just paying as little as they can for mass-produced food, and so that all their money can go for shareholders? We don't have, and people go, oh, it's cheap. It's like, I'm telling you now, it's not cheaper than going to a farm. And this is the amazing thing. It is, I go to my local biodynamic organic farm. It's a little farm. They're constantly under pressure from getting enough customers. They don't get the kind of publicity. They'll get the land pressure. And they've been there for 34 years now. And they're a big supporter of Trinity Farm, Nottingham. However, most people just go to their supermarket. It doesn't make any sense for them. It doesn't make any sense for their families, doesn't make any sense for their health, and it doesn't make any sense for their freedom for what's going to be coming for, this digital ID. It makes no sense. But because they've always done it, they're going to kind of carry on to always do it. But we have to start creating organizations together as groups. We don't need permission off anybody to start creating groups and organizations where we can find this information. Because from the cabbie and the health point of view, which you and I have been involved with, Anna, you did a brilliant thing. You got people together who are creating health hubs or all practitioners from all over the country to talk to each other. Because what we found was there isn't there isn't a way that everybody kind of talks to each other. I mean, there's national conferences for the NHS, there's national conferences for this, that, and the other, right? But there isn't here. It's not being created. So everybody's operating on their own. People who are sick, the only thing they know how to do is ring up the doctor. They've got no other alternative. They can look in the yellow pages or the equivalent, but they don't know what they're looking for. So you're not going to get taught it at school. The government's definitely not going to tell you about it. It's not going to be handed to you. So it's up to us. And our responsibility is to create these hubs of information where we can all get together, chat about this stuff, and come up with our own solutions. And it isn't just for the healthcare sector. It's for, we were talking about it, it's for DIY, it's for plumbing, it's for mechanics, it's for all of this stuff that we have let slide. It's okay, I'll just ring somebody up to sort it, right? We've all been made to be totally independent, like everybody's acting as an independent business, nobody's collaborating together. And when push comes to shove, that's it. We're isolated, we've got nowhere else to go. And that's why we're shoved into these things. That's our choice. We are literally allowing it to happen. And frankly, we don't want to be doing this when push comes to shove. We want to do it when we can see this is the way it's going, right? We want to do it now while we have the opportunity to make change, not when it's too late.
So bringing this back to astrology, we can see how Uranus in Gemini might be being used by some people. But what I can tell you is that Uranus in Gemini will bring tremendous innovation. You know, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. And so wherever you find Uranus is where you are going to find innovation because of necessity. We found that innovation in areas to do with, let's call it the exchange of services, whilst it's been in Taurus. There's been so much that's happening in that respect. And also in farming, there's such a resurgence of interest in things like biodynamic farming, etc. But equally now we're going to find tremendous innovation in matters to do with technology that is around information and transportation. And some of it will be grassroots because Uranus, the impulse is to liberate and to decentralize. So as much as we get that energy being harnessed by those who want to centralize, Uranus's natural inclination is also to decentralize. So I think that there is going to be a lot of innovation in this area. And one final word of encouragement. Uranus is about working together. Now, that can be co-opted into idealistic collective systems which have the intention of centralizing power. So beware, because, and I'm sure people listening to this are very aware of this, that because we as human beings are social creatures, we like the idea of being around other people, which is why ostracizing is such an isolation, is a punishment. And so we will get ideas of communal living being presented to us. Oh, it's a city that has everything you need in it. You don't have to leave it. Um, it's, you know, it's everything is within 15-minute walk for you. So yeah, brilliant, isn't it? But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the decentralization that allows grassroots communities to emerge, working and collaborating together while respecting mutual freedom and independence, and collaborating with other communities. So, a network of independent and free communities that are being created at grassroots level. There is a difference. Uranus can represent both. It's up to you which one you choose.
Right. Sounds like it's the right time for BSV. Well, let's not have time to talk about this. Anna, this has been fascinating. And the final thing I want to, in the time we've got, because I'm going to bring you back on the show because we've got so much to talk about. And I hope this has brought a different perspective on astrology to people. That you're running a course soon, and I'm just going to quickly share my page because I think everybody what Anna's just shared is more than magical. This is a quantum nature of our reality. Okay, we can see it as magical, but there are definitely mechanisms by which this works, and even mainstream science is kind of pinning this together. So you're up and coming, friends. So if we find your website, which is lifeastrologer.com, for those of you listening and can't see the screen in front of us, I'll describe it. And when you go on events, you have an event on Wednesday, the 15th of October online, and it's called Mastering the Signs and Planets, Comprehensive Astrology Course, Module 1. Will you describe like this module and how it will evolve and what people
Yes.
can expect?
So this is a bi-weekly course, and each lesson is 2 hours long, and it is designed to introduce everyone to the 12 signs of the zodiac and the symbolism behind them, as well as getting a basic understanding of the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, because those are perhaps the core parts of the chart for describing the personality traits. So each of them will represent something. So the sun represents the identity, but the moon represents instinct and needs. Mercury represents the way that we think. Venus represents the way that we relate and what we value. Mars represents our relationship with anger and how we assert ourselves or not. And so it's when we're doing this, we're very much I give you talks to listen to as well, so that it's the lesson plus talks that you can listen to, plus notes. And then so each lesson deepens that and gives you the opportunity to look at your own chart. And so this is the way in which I present information. Is there is the period in which you take in the information, and then there's the opportunity to apply it. And it's when you apply it that everything begins to take place. This is an online course. And so if you want to join, now is the time. Just email and you'll be on.
Yeah, life astrologer at hotmail.com, but you'll find lifeastrologer.com. And this is very good value, Anna. This is very good value for money. I'm just saying, guys,
It,
wow.
yeah, I think so, because this isn't about learning astrology. This is about developing a relationship with yourself that is based on self-understanding and awareness, that is going to really be helpful to you. And crucially, it's also going to help you with your relationships, because as you begin to understand more about astrology, you will look at the charts of your loved ones, and everyone who comes into your life. I have a lot of therapists who then begin to use this with clients, etc. So if you've got a business and you've got employees and you get a handle, even just knowing their sun sign, you begin to understand them better. So this is an investment, not just in learning astrology, but it's an investment in helping you to develop tools to improve your relationship, your understanding with yourself, your relationship with others, and also with the world. Because when you begin to open the door of understanding in astrology, you are beginning to understand more about different philosophies that have been presented to us throughout time, and interacting with those, and it opens you to deeper thinking and a deeper understanding of the world that you live in. So this is why I love astrology. And if I tell you one thing that students always tell me is, however did I manage without this?
I can so understand this. You see, we talk about being awake, and I think that word's been hijacked in very many different ways, and it's been hijacked to say someone's awake might, have certain views about the government. Well, well, surely, that isn't being awake. Being awake is being consciously aware of you, why you think the way you do, what you know about things. It's about you and your level of consciousness. And like we were discussing before, most people are walking through their life completely unconscious. And I say at the beginning of my talks that I do, I say, I hate to break this to you, but that isn't a personality. That isn't your personality you were born with. That's your program. And you were born with the program and you've developed a program. So I hate to say, but that's your program you're running. Now, there might be some aspects of that program that you're enjoying and some that you're not. But the key is for you to find out what your program is, and then have the freedom is choosing what you intend to express yourself with, not what you are programmed with, because that just makes you a robot. And the vast majority of people are walking around like that. And having tools like this to be able to interpret that, because the person in front of you, most of them don't know it. You can't ask them. You can't even ask them the questions, or you can do an interview. You can do all this kind of stuff, or you can chat with them. But if they're running unconsciously, they're just going to repeat whatever their program is, not necessarily going to be able to reflect their true, authentic self, or the environment. So having these kind of tools is absolutely fascinating. I think it's absolutely well worth the money, Anna. I think people are going to absolutely love this. And I, is there anything else you want to say about this course? I am really tempted to do this and trying to fit it in with all the things that I'm doing, because it'd be great to know more than just I'm a Virgo, because that hasn't really got me very far. Just
I think I will say this. I was given a book about astrology when I was, I believe, 21, and I never looked back.
Wow. This is the
And
keys.
and the reason is because it taught me that I am a part of something very beautiful, bigger than me. And it taught me, you know, I used to think that all my foibles and all my weaknesses, I was the only one in the world who had them. And then I discovered I am not alone.
Brilliant.
So it taught me a lot about the human condition. It turned me into a therapist eventually. And it helps me to make sense of the insanity that is often around us.
And bring compassion. Wow.
And most of all, it showed me the vulnerability that is there within all of us.
Hmm.
And it opened my heart more. So I would say that astrology has made me a better person. And so my hope is for all of my students, and I see it happening, as they discover this, and their enthusiasm is always massive. The more they know, the more enthusiastic they become. It's brilliant. I hope it too opens them up, and I know it does, to understanding others around them. And at this time, if we want to talk about raising our frequency, it's all about working on ourselves so that we can be free to be. To quote something that floats about perhaps a bit too often, but which is apt in this moment, to be free to be the best that you can be. This is a great start. And we need that. We need everyone to be free to be the best that they can be, because this is how we get to that better human experience that we all long for.
Thank you so much, Anna. I think you've finished the podcast off very nicely. So thank you very much to everybody listening to the Crystal Water Experience podcast, where I bring on fantastic people across a range of different perspectives on natural health and the things that kind of aren't mainstream, to kind of bring a no-nonsense and modern day take on what those are. And Anna's done that beautifully today. So thank you very much for that, Anna.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share something that I'm very deeply passionate
For
about.
sure. And I'm so grateful that you're on our side, but we need more because Anna can't be in every single meeting, right? And now I understand from this meeting how in kind of the cabin meetings and as I've known you, where you've been kind of like focusing our attention on certain things because you can see what's coming. You can see. And that isn't because, woo-woo psychic stuff, it's because we've described the mechanism before. So we need more people like that, whether they're working on, working for the good of humanity. So hop on this course, very good value for money, massive range of applications, see life and the world around you and the people around you differently. So join me again for the next podcast. Head on to lifeastrologer.com when you put the phone down now so you don't forget and get in touch with Anna. So thank you very much, everybody, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.